A stray cat found a cradle floating in the river. What was found inside surprised everyone. "You think this is a joke, kid? A poor animal fighting for its life in that cold water?" Sheriff Miller growled, looking straight at Jake. The teenager smirked. "It's just a dog, Sheriff. What's the big deal?" To discover the whole story full of surprises and emotions, as well as the dramatic developments that follow, click the subscribe button, like this video, and listen to the full story of Rusty and Lucky. The waters of the Willamette River in the small town of Havenwood, Oregon, were exceptionally cold this morning. A thin layer of mist still clung to the surface as the first rays of a late autumn sun struggled to break through. Amidst this tranquil scene, a strange object, a child's cradle made of dark oak, bobbed close to the bank, caught in the roots of an old oak tree. The side of the cradle bumped a root with a soft thud, enough to break the silence. From the shadows of a dense thicket nearby, a pair of keen green eyes flashed. Rusty, the fiery-furred stray cat, a familiar wanderer of Havenwood, froze. His ears perked, turning towards the cradle. At first, there was only the gurgling specifique of the water and the rustling of wind through the leaves. But then, another sound, faint, fragile, almost inaudible, emanated from within the cradle. A soft, intermittent whimper. Rusty, with the cautious instinct of his kind, slowly approached. He moved silently, his orange coat blending with the carpet of dry leaves. The cradle looked old, the paint peeling in places, but it was still intact. The musty smell of wood and the earthy scent of the river filled his nostrils. The whimper came again, a little clearer this time, full of fear and desperation. Rusty paused a few feet from the cradle, his body board size. He looked around. No one was there, only the river and the awakening sparse forest. The cat took a deep breath, then cautiously stepped forward and leaped onto the cradle's rim. The cradle rocked Bullenhage. Rusty looked down. Beneath a thin, pale blue blanket, something was moving weakly. He gently nudged the blanket with his nose. Just then, the sound of rustling footsteps on the riverside path grew closer. Mr. Arthur Peterson, a retired teacher with a habit of taking morning walks, appeared from around a bend. He stopped when he saw Rusty, the stray he occasionally fed, behaving namjali beside an object he'd never seen there before. "Rusty, what are you doing up there?" Mr. Peterson asked, his voice surprised. Rusty looked up, met Mr. Peterson's gaze, then looked back down into the cradle, letting out an urgent meow. Mr. Peterson drew closer. Curiosity mingled with a vague unease. He peered into the cradle, following Rusty's gaze, and then he froze. His face changed color. Inside the cradle, under the thin blanket, was not a forgotten doll. It was a living creature. A pair of wide, dazed, and terrified eyes stared up at him. Its whole body was soaked, trembling uncontrollably. "Good Lord," Mr. Peterson exclaimed, his voice trembling. "It's a puppy." Rusty was no ordinary cat. At least that's what a few residents of Havenwood, Oregon often said about him. With his signature fiery orange fur and intelligent green eyes, Rusty had been a wanderer in this riverside town for several years. No one knew where he came from. He had simply appeared initially a furtive shadow in the alleys, then gradually becoming bolder, though always maintaining a certain distance from humans. Rusty survived on what he could find, and unlucky mouse leftovers from restaurant dumpsters, or occasionally the kindness of a few residents like Mr. Peterson. Mr. Arthur Peterson, 72, was a retired history teacher from Havenwood High. Since retiring, he walked along the Willamette River every morning, a habit that helped him stay healthy and enjoy the town's tranquility. He knew Rusty quite well, or at least as well as one could know a stray cat. He often noticed the brightly furred cat talk, and sometimes he'd leave a little cat food at the base of the old oak tree near his house, a spot Rusty frequented. He never tried to catch or tame Rusty, simply accepting his presence as a familiar part of Havenwood. That morning, upon seeing the sight within the cradle, Mr. Peterson's morning peace vanished. The puppy, a very young golden Labrador, perhaps only a few weeks old, lay huddled, soaked, and shivering. A thin old rope was tied around its neck, the other end loosely fastened to a crossbar inside the cradle. This was clearly no accident. Someone had deliberately done this. "Oh, you poor thing," Mr. Peterson murmured, initial shock quickly giving way to anger and pity. He carefully removed the blanket, trying not to frighten the puppy further. Rusty remained perched on the cradle's rim, silently observing, his green eyes fixed on the small dog. Mr. Peterson said softly, "It's okay, little one. You're safe now." He knew he had to act fast. The puppy needed warmth and medical attention immediately. He pulled out his cell phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed the number of Mrs. Eleanor Albright, who ran the town's small animal shelter, Havenwood Animal Friends. "Eleanor, it's Arthur," he said quickly when the call connected. "I'm by the river near the miller's old oak tree. There's an emergency. A puppy, abandoned in a cradle floating in the river. It's in bad shape." Mrs. Albright's voice on the other end was filled with shock, then quickly turned resolute. "I'll be right there. Keep it warm, Arthur." While waiting, Mr. Peterson took off his woolen cardigan and carefully wrapped it around the puppy, trying to provide some warmth. Rusty jumped to the ground, circled Mr. Peterson's legs, and gently rubbed his head against his trousers in a strangely reassuring gesture. It seemed the stray cat also sensed the gravity of the situation. Soon Mrs. Albright's old pickup truck appeared. Eleanor, a woman in her late 60s with silver hair and a kind yet firm face, quickly got out carrying a thick towel and a small transport kennel. "Good heavens!" she exclaimed upon seeing the puppy in Mr. Peterson's arms. "How could anyone be so cruel?" Mrs. Albright carefully took the puppy, performing a quick check. "Weak pulse, low body temperature. We need to get him to Dr. Evans' clinic right away." She glanced at the rope still loosely tied around the puppy's neck. Unbelievable. This was clearly intentional. The inciting incident had occurred. The discovery of Lucky, the name Mrs. Albright would later give the puppy in the cradle, was not just a shocking event for Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Albright. It was the beginning of a series of events that would stir the normally peaceful town of Havenwood. And Rusty, the orange stray cat who first found him, had unwittingly become a central figure in the story. News of the cruelly abandoned puppy in the cradle spread quickly throughout Havenwood. The small town didn't usually have much sensational news, so the incident immediately became the topic of conversation at the Rusty Mug Cafe, in the Henderson family's general store, and on the town's community Facebook page. Sheriff Dale Miller, a stern-looking but straightforward local man, personally came to the scene shortly after receiving the call from Mrs. Albright. "This isn't a prank," Sheriff Miller stated firmly to Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Albright by the riverbank. "This is animal cruelty, a serious offense. We'll investigate it thoroughly." He looked at Rusty, who was now sitting under the oak tree, grooming himself with a detached air, though his ears were still perked listening. "This cat seems to be an important witness," he said, half joking, half serious. The investigation began. Mr. Peterson recounted in detail how Rusty had drawn his attention. Mrs. Albright provided information on the puppy's condition, now named Lucky, who was under the special care of veterinarian Dr. Amanda Evans at the Havenwood Veterinary Clinic. Lucky was severely weakened by cold and hunger, but fortunately had no serious injuries other than the mark of the rope on his neck. Sheriff Miller assigned 2 deputies, Officer Davis and Officer Chen, to interview people living near the river area. A crucial clue came from Timmy Robertson, a 9-year-old boy living at the end of Oak Street. Timmy said that the previous evening, while playing in his backyard, he had seen a group of unfamiliar teenagers lingering near the river. "I saw them with a little yellow dog," Timmy shyly told Officer Davis. "They were laughing really loud, and then I heard the dog yelp a few times. They were also dragging something that looked like a big wooden box. Based on Timmy's description, 3 teenagers, one blonde, one tall, wearing a black hoodie and one wearing glasses, and by reviewing fuzzy security camera footage from the Main Street deli at the edge of town, which recorded a suspicious old pickup truck entering and leaving town, around that time, Sheriff Miller quickly narrowed down the suspects. It was a group of teenagers from Clackamas, a larger town about 30 miles from Havenwood, known for their disruptive behavior. Meanwhile, at the veterinary clinic, Lucky was gradually recovering under the dedicated care of Dr. Evans and her assistants. The little dog had started to eat a little and was no longer shivering. Rusty somehow seemed to keep tabs on the situation. Occasionally, he was seen take outside the clinic, just sitting there looking through the glass door before silently disappearing again. 3 days later, Sheriff Miller and Officer Davis drove to Clackamas. With the cooperation of the local police, they found the 3 teenagers: Jake Riley, 17, blonde; Mike Tank Kowalski, 18, a large-build owner of the pickup truck; and Alex Pham, 16, wearing glasses, the most innocent-looking of the 3. The interrogation took place at the Clackamas police station. Initially, all 3 denied everything. "We don't know anything," Jake shrugged, feigning indifference. "Puppy cradle. What are you talking about?" Mike just grumbled. "We didn't do anything." Sheriff Miller, with years of experience dealing with all sorts of criminals, remained calm. He placed photos of Lucky taken right after he was rescued, the cradle and the rope on the table. "So these things just appeared on the bank of the Willamette River by themselves?" Miller asked, his voice even but weighty. "And a boy in Havenwood saw 3 individuals matching your descriptions there the night before with a puppy in a wooden box." Alex began to look flustered, glancing at his 2 friends. "It was just a joke," Jake finally admitted, his voice still defiant. "We found the dog wandering near Alex's house. We thought it would be funny to put it in that old cradle tank found at the junkyard and set it afloat on the river, just for laughs." "For laughs?" Sheriff Miller's voice hardened. "Do you have any idea that action could have killed the dog? Do you find it funny when a living creature suffers fear and pain like that?" He paused, looking directly into each of their eyes. "Or was there another purpose? Were you planning to film it, post it on social media for a few cheap likes?" Alex hung his head. Mike started to sweat. Silence filled the room. Then Alex mumbled, "Jake." Jake said, "If it didn't float, it would also be funny." An even more horrifying truth emerged as Sheriff Miller continued his questioning based on a detail he had initially overlooked from Timmy's testimony. The boy had heard the sound of metal clanking. "We found several rocks in the cradle," Miller said slowly, observing their reactions. "Those rocks didn't get there by themselves, did they?" Mike stammered. Just to make it heavier, so it wouldn't tip over." But Jake, with an unpleasant smirk, added, "To make it more dramatic, Sheriff, if it sank slowly and then we rushed in to save it, the video would have been much hotter." The intention to stage a fake rescue after deliberately putting the animal in a dangerous situation, possibly even planning to make it sink faster, made Sheriff Miller and Officer Davis shudder at the cruelty and calculation of these teenagers. The incident was no longer just a foolish prank. It bore the hallmarks of intentional malice. The complication was not just finding the culprits, but also confronting the reality that young people could harbor such indifference and cruelty. After the teenagers confessed, a wave of genuine outrage erupted in Havenwood and neighboring communities as details of the incident were published in the Havenwood Herald and on social media. People were both disgusted by the actions of Jake, Mike, and Alex and felt immense pity for Lucky. Supportive calls and emails poured into Havenwood Animal Friends Shelter and Dr. Evans's clinic. Lucky, from an anonymous victim, suddenly became a symbol of resilience against cruelty, and Rusty the stray cat was hailed as a silent hero. It seemed things were gradually heading in a positive direction. Lucky was recovering well, and legal proceedings against the teenagers were underway. The residents of Havenwood began to feel a sense of relief, believing that justice would be served and Lucky would soon find a loving home. But then, an unexpected turning point occurred, a new shock that dashed everyone's hopes. A few days after the interrogation, when Lucky seemed to have fully recovered happily, wagging his tail at all the clinic staff, Dr. Amanda Evans decided to perform a final comprehensive checkup before allowing Lucky to be adopted. She wanted to ensure the little dog had no underlying issues caused by his recent ordeal. Mrs. Albright was at the clinic that afternoon, planning to take Lucky back to the shelter to begin the process of finding him a new home. She was cheerfully chatting with a veterinary nurse when Dr. Evans emerged from the examination room, her usual bright expression replaced by a hint of tension and anxiety. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you privately for a moment," Dr. Evans said softly, her tone serious. Sensing something was wrong, Mrs. Albright followed Dr. Evans into her office. "Is something wrong with Lucky, Amanda?" she asked, trying to remain calm. "He seems fine." Dr. Evans sighed, placing a test result sheet on the desk. "Physically, the damage from the cold and starvation has healed well, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The results of the echocardiogram and specialized blood tests show a much more serious problem. Lucky has a fairly rare congenital heart defect in Labrador retrievers called subaortic stenosis. His aortic valve is abnormally narrow, forcing his heart to work much harder to pump blood to the rest of his body." Mrs. Albright felt her heart stop. "A congenital heart defect. How serious is it?" "At Lucky's level, it's classified as moderate to severe," Dr. Evans explained. "Normally, if detected early and the dog leads a calm, stress-free life, some can live relatively stable lives for a few years. However, the massive shock Lucky just experienced, the fear, the cold, and possibly prolonged lack of oxygen while in the water, has made his condition much worse. Lucky's heart is currently under severe strain. Without intervention, I'm afraid—" Dr. Evans didn't need to finish the sentence. Mrs. Albright understood. "So, what can we do?" Her voice wavered. Tears began to well up. After everything Lucky had endured, after the little dog had bravely survived that cruel act, now a death sentence hung over him. "There is a surgical procedure," Dr. Evans continued, "called a balloon valvuloplasty. It's a complex procedure requiring a veterinary cardiologist and specialized equipment. The success rate isn't absolute and the cost is very high." She handed Mrs. Albright an estimated cost sheet from a specialty veterinary hospital in Portland. The figure far exceeded the capabilities of Havenwood's small shelter. This was the story's turning point. The issue was no longer just about punishing the culprits or finding a home for Lucky. Now it was a race against time to save the little dog's life from an invisible but equally dangerous enemy. This event pushed the community's emotions from outrage to despair, and then from despair, a new determination began to smolder. Albright sat silently in Dr. Evans' office, staring at the cost estimate. She felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. But when she thought of Lucky's clear, trusting eyes and Rusty's brave actions, she knew she couldn't give up. "We have to try, Amanda," she said, her voice now firmer. "We have to give Lucky a chance, at any cost." This decision changed everything. The Havenwood community, from being observers and moral supporters, now had to become direct actors. The fight for Lucky's life had entered a new, more arduous and challenging phase. Mrs. Albright's decision to operate on Lucky quickly gained the support of Dr. Evans and spread throughout the Havenwood community. The Havenwood Herald immediately ran a front-page article with a large headline, "Lucky, the second fight for life begins. Community unites for a brave heart." The article detailed Lucky's congenital heart condition, its exacerbation after the abandonment incident, and the urgent need for an expensive surgery. The story of Rusty, the heroic stray cat, was once again recounted as a source of inspiration. A fundraising campaign called A Heart for Lucky was launched with great fanfare. Mrs. Albright, with the help of volunteers at the shelter and enthusiastic townspeople, organized a series of events. Donation jars were placed in shops all over town. At the Rusty Mug Cafe, a portion of every Lucky Latte sold went to the fund. Mr. Johnson's Havenwood Hardware held an auction of handcrafted items. Havenwood Elementary School organized a charity car wash. Sarah Jenkins, a third-grade teacher. Shui loved animals, and her students made cards, Guryo, Rusty, and Lucky, to sell for the fund. "The children love this story," she shared. "They're learning about compassion, courage, and the importance of helping vulnerable creatures." Initially, the amount raised was not substantial. Havenwood was a small town, not particularly wealthy. Mrs. Albright began to worry. Time was not on their side. Lucky's condition could deteriorate at any moment. Dr. Evans had contacted VCA Northwest Veterinary Specialists Hospital in Portland, which had top cardiologists and the necessary equipment. They had agreed to take Lucky's case, but the surgery needed to be performed as soon as possible. During these days, Rusty also seemed to sense the urgency. He was often seen Tiala near the veterinary clinic, sometimes just sitting quietly under the tree opposite, his green eyes fixed on the clinic window where Lucky was being monitored. Once Emily, the young veterinary nurse, stepped out during her lunch break and saw Rusty sitting there. The cat looked up at her, then gently placed a vibrant red maple leaf he had carried from somewhere right before the doorstep, and silently walked away. Emily picked up the leaf, smiling. "You're worried about Lucky too, aren't you, boy?" A small turning point in the fundraising campaign occurred when Rusty and Lucky's story was shared by a well-known animal blogger in Oregon. The post quickly went viral on social media, attracting attention from many people outside Havenwood. Small donations from all over the state, and even from a few neighboring states, began to flow into the A Heart for Lucky account. Meanwhile, legal proceedings against Jake, Mike, and Alex continued. Faced with irrefutable evidence and public pressure, all three pleaded guilty to animal cruelty. The juvenile court hearing was scheduled for a few weeks later. Their parents also faced embarrassment and criticism from their community in Clackamas. Some Havenwood residents were angry, believing the punishment for them might not be deterrent enough. But for now, the town's main focus remained on saving Lucky. After nearly 3 weeks of tireless campaigning, the raised funds finally neared the amount needed for the surgery and post-operative care. A large anonymous donation at the last minute covered the remaining shortfall. Mrs. Albright didn't know who it was, only that human kindness was sometimes limitless. The day Lucky was transferred to Portland for surgery preparation arrived. Dr. Evans personally drove Lucky, accompanied by Mrs. Albright. Before the car left Havenwood, it passed down Main Street. Rusty was sitting on the wooden fence of a house, his orange fur striking in the afternoon sun. As the car passed, the cat just tilted his head slightly, his green eyes following it until it disappeared from view. The following days were filled with tense waiting. Mrs. Albright stayed in Portland to be with Lucky. The entire town of Havenwood held its breath. Prayers were offered. People updated news through the Havenwood Animal Friends Facebook page, where Emily, the vet nurse, regularly posted brief updates from Mrs. Albright. The stakes had been raised to their highest. All the effort, hope, and love of an entire community now rested in the hands of the surgeons and the resilience of a small puppy with a heart in need of healing. The final challenge lay ahead. The day of Lucky's surgery at VCA Northwest Veterinary Specialists Hospital in Portland was an agonizingly long one. In Havenwood, the atmosphere was more subdued than usual. People tried to go about their daily routines, but their thoughts were constantly with the little dog. At Dr. Evans' clinic, the phone barely rang, as if everyone was hesitant to disturb her, knowing she too was anxiously awaiting news. Mrs. Albright sat in the waiting room of the veterinary hospital in Portland. She had been there since early morning. Time passed with painful slowness. Each tick of the wall clock seemed to drill deeper into her anxiety. She tried to read a book but couldn't concentrate. Occasionally a nurse would pass by offering an encouraging smile, but no one could provide any specific information. The balloon valvuloplasty was a delicate procedure fraught with risks. 4 hours passed, then 5. Mrs. Albright began to feel a sense of despair. She closed her eyes, murmuring a prayer. She thought of Rusty, the strange stray cat who had started it all. Without Rusty, Lucky might never have had this chance. Finally, the door to the operating suite opened. Dr. Sarah Walker, the lead veterinary cardiologist for the surgery, stepped out. She removed her surgical mask. Her face looked tired, but her eyes held an indescribable spark. Mrs. Albright shot to her feet, her heart pounding. "Dr. Lucky? How is Lucky?" Dr. Walker approached, placing a hand on Mrs. Albright's shoulder. "The surgery was very complex, Eleanor. Lucky's aortic valve was narrower than we initially anticipated. There were some difficult moments." She paused for a moment that felt like an eternity to Mrs. Albright. Then Dr. Walker smiled faintly. "But this little guy is a true fighter. We successfully dilated the valve. The pressure gradient across the valve has significantly decreased. Of course, there's still a long road to recovery ahead, and we need to monitor him closely for the next few days, but the surgery was successful. Lucky is out of immediate danger." The tears Mrs. Albright had been trying so hard to hold back suddenly burst forth. She was speechless, only able to grip Dr. Walker's hand tightly, tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. Thank you, doctor. Thank you all." The good news quickly reached Havenwood. Emily received the call from Mrs. Albright and nearly shouted with joy in the clinic. She hastily posted a short status update on Facebook. "Lucky did its surgery, successful. Thank you all for your love and support." The entire town seemed to erupt in celebration. The bells of St. Michael's Church, which usually only rang on special occasions, chimed joyfully that afternoon, an impromptu decision by Father Michael, who had also been closely following Lucky's story. The following weeks saw Lucky's miraculous recovery. The little dog proved to be stronger than anyone had expected. Under the dedicated care of the doctors in Portland and later Dr. Evans, when he returned to Havenwood, Lucky gradually regained his health. His surgical scar faded, and the energy of a puppy began to return. He ran, played, and wagged his tail incessantly, his clear eyes shining with the joy of life. The trial of Jake, Mike, and Alex took place a few weeks later. Convicted of animal cruelty and endangering an animal, all three received appropriate sentences under Oregon's juvenile justice laws. Jake, the ringleader, received the harshest penalty, including many hours of community service at a large animal rescue center, a mandatory course on ethics and animal rights, and a lengthy probation period. Mike and Alex received similar but lighter sentences. The incident became a costly lesson for them and a stark warning to other teenagers about the consequences of cruel actions. After his full recovery, the question of a permanent home for Lucky arose. Many families in Havenwood and beyond expressed interest in adopting the heroic puppy. Ultimately, Mrs. Albright and Dr. Evans decided to entrust Lucky to the Robertson family, the family of young Timmy, who had provided the crucial clue that led police to the culprits. Timmy was overjoyed. He promised to love and care for Lucky with all his heart. Life in Havenwood gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but one thing had changed forever. The sense of community had become stronger, and Rusty, the orange stray cat, was no longer an anonymous wanderer. He became a symbol, a little hero of the town. People often left good food for him in his usual haunts. Children in town greeted him affectionately whenever they saw him. He still maintained the independence of a stray, but he seemed more tolerant of human attention. Occasionally, Rusty would be seen sitting on the Robertsons' fence, silently watching Lucky play in the yard with Timmy. There seemed to be an invisible connection between them, an unspoken understanding. Lucky, whenever he saw the familiar orange figure, would wag his tail furiously and bark joyfully. One evening at sunset, Rusty sat again by the bank of the Willamette River, where it all began. The water flowed languidly, the orange-gold light of dusk tinting his fur. He squinted his eyes, enjoying the peace. The little stray cat had unwittingly started a dramatic yet deeply human story, proving that courage and making a difference can come from the most unexpected places. Havenwood would never forget the cat who found the cradle floating in the river and the miracle it brought.